welcome to How to Buy a Home 101. My name is Amanda Thompson, and I work with Habitat for Humanity of Southeast Indiana, and I will be your host today. We have three speakers today. First is Jessica Butler from Legacy Land Use and Realty. She'll be speaking about the home buying experience from a realtor's point of view. We also have Keith Collins from Kentuckiana Mortgage Group, and he will be speaking about the process from the mortgage side. And then finally, we'll have Shelby Wilson, who is the executive director of Habitat Southeast, and she will be explaining the home buying process from Habitat's point of view. If we have anyone join us, please feel free to put questions in the chat. I also have some questions that I'll ask a little later that some folks sent in. And we welcome any questions that you may have. So Jessica, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you.
Awesome. Hello, I am Jessica Butler, and I am really excited to be here with you today. I am a licensed managing broker, and I do have a new business of my own here in Madison, Legacy Land Use and Realty. I work in the Madison area primarily, but all of Southern Indiana. I do help sellers, but I much enjoy working with buyers. And there's something special about working with first-time home buyers through the process to really feel like you can impact their comfort and confidence through what can be a tricky process. We want to make it mostly fun, but there can be some puzzles to figure out, and I'm happy to accompany a home buyer through that process. I do live in downtown Madison. I want to demystify the home buying journey. We'll go over what to expect, how to get ready financially and emotionally, and how we are here to support you through the process. I am here today with Keith Collins, and he will introduce himself next.
Yeah, so I'm Keith Collins, and I'm a mortgage broker and owner of Kentuckiana Mortgage Group. We are located in downtown Madison. I'm from Louisville, but I do live in Madison and have been here for 6 years. And I also will be living downtown as of next week. So I have been doing lending for 15 years and specialize in, pretty much any type of loan that there is out there. And I really try to make the home buying process easy, because I think finding a home and getting under contract, and to me, should be a lot more difficult than the mortgage process. So a lot of times we were able to get people into homes within 30 days, oftentimes without a down payment, especially in Madison. And first-time home buyers are definitely a specialty of mine. So.
Okay, I'm going to start by talking what is probably on everybody's mind when they begin to think about buying a house, and that is whether to continue to rent or to go the route of purchasing your home, a home. First, renting offers flexibility. If you're not sure where you'll be in a year or two, or you're testing out a new city or a new job, renting gives you a good amount of freedom. You're generally not responsible for maintenance or repairs at that location, and the upfront costs are usually lower. On the other hand, owning a home builds equity, which is essentially your financial stake in the property. Over time, as you pay down your mortgage and property values generally tend to rise, you will gain real wealth. Home ownership also offers stability. You're not subject to rent hikes and the risk of landlord deciding to sell the property. And of course, there's the freedom to customize your space. Although you might be able to do so with a rental, the term sunken money comes up often with rentals, and the improvements you make on the property will not be yours ultimately in value. When you're deciding to go toward buying, you definitely need to focus in on a few factors like budget and your job stability. Those are going to be key through the process, especially with Keith. or your lender for that matter. But are you financially ready for the upfront costs of buying? And at the time that you realize you do have the upfront costs kind of saved for, you also need to prove that you're going to be able to make the payments and maintain the property that is with your job history and such. So job stability does matter. Um, uh, your lender can walk you through maybe a change of employment and see how it kind of comes together in a matrix and does assure a bank or lender that you can follow through with a mortgage. Um, Lifestyle, it will change as a homeowner. You will not have the flexibility that you can hold on to if you continue to rent. I always say that it's not just a financial decision, it's also a lifestyle one. Being a homeowner is a very prideful opportunity, but it does come with responsibilities. I'll introduce these steps, though some of them are key to discuss. The key steps in the home buying process, you'll want to get pre-approved. That means talking to a lender and getting your hands around what your budget is. You'll want to choose a realtor. I'll explain more about why I encourage you to work with a realtor a little later. You'll start the house hunting process. You will make an offer, you will get an inspection, and you will finalize the mortgage. And that's the closing on your new home.
And so I'll kind of talk about how getting pre-approved for a mortgage works, just kind of high level. So basically, when we pre-approve somebody, it's really not that complicated of a process. I think sometimes people are a little bit nervous about what we have to do to get that done. But basically, when I pre-approve someone, what we do is we just basically pull your credit first, and kind of look to see where your credit scores are. And then we also look at your debt ratio at that point in time, because mainly what a lender is looking to kind of make sure of is that you can qualify for the home without running into any financial difficulty. At the same time, we're also going to talk about like your income, how long you've been on your job, what type of pay you receive, because there's different ways that you have to qualify, whether you're paid hourly or salary or commission. And so when we're doing the pre-approval, we kind of talk through all of those things just to make sure that we're using the right income number for the pre-approval process to get pre-approved. And typically with a pre-approval, it can get done, within 10 minutes, especially like when credit's in good shape and the pay is good. Employment history is something that people worry about a lot of times, but really what we're looking at more is that you've consistently held a job versus like been on this job for 2 years. Because if you went from, one job to another job and received a pay raise, not going to be anything that's going to cause any problems for us. Sometimes if like we do run into issues if you go from like a salary type position to then an hourly position where you're not working 40 hours a week, because if you're working 30 hours a week, then we're going to want to see that you've been on that job for at least a year. But if you're basically kind of going from, a salary to a salary position, you could change jobs during the loan process as long as you're improving your financial stakes. So, but getting pre-approved, we try to make it very easy and simple. And you don't want to make big purchases when you're, buying a home. So, if you need a new car, then I would say wait until we're done with the home buying process until you do anything major like that. And then in terms of like what we look for credit score, I think a lot of times there's kind of this idea that you have to have great credit to buy a house. Not every, lender can go as low as we can as a mortgage broker, but basically like, we can do loans for people as low as 500, as long as that individual has 10% down And we also have to look at like their credit because, if there's recent credit issues when you have that low of a score, there's definitely no guarantee that we'll be able to get you into a house. But I have definitely done, plenty of loans for people who have less than a 580 credit score. And then the nice thing about, living in Madison and the surrounding area is that as long as you have like a 580 and above, there's a chance that we could do a 0% down USDA loan. They do have income qualifications with USDA, but for the most part, that's something that we can look at so that, you can get into a house, potentially with no money out of pocket as long as the seller is willing to pay your closing cost. And then just, some budgeting things to kind of keep in mind when you're buying a home. So down payments can vary a lot. I talk to people all the time who think that they have to have 20% down, which is a huge misnomer in our world because most people that I do loans for do not have 20% down. So the down payment can range from 0% all the way really to, 95%. Just however much you need to get your loan for is, it can typically be done. Closing costs, they can be expensive. However, a lot of times, we will ask the seller to pay all of your closing cost. It's a negotiation, so it's not anything that, the seller has to do, but, it's definitely something that, if needed, things that we will kind of plan for as we talk with Jessica, as your realtor, I'll let her know like, well, hey, we need all the closing costs paid by the seller. And that way that when she goes to make an offer, we make sure to ask the seller to pay all those. Normally when you make an offer on a house, like they're going to want to see an earnest money deposit, which is basically just kind of a good faith deposit that, will be refunded to you at closing. It also can vary greatly. It could be, $200 all the way up to, $10,000, just depending on the situation. But definitely not something that is going to, should price you out of buying a home. And then typically you're going to do a home inspection, which I think Jessica, you can kind of chime in just because I don't deal with that side as much. They typically run for about how much?
400 to 600 based on the size of the home.
Okay. And basically, a home inspection is different from an appraisal because the appraiser is kind of mainly going out to look at a house to kind of give us an idea of what the house is worth. They're not necessarily looking for how the plumbing is or if is the crawl space in good shape or, how old is the roof. They're really just kind of looking out, to see what the value is. Whereas a home inspector is actually there to basically kind of make sure like all the issues that you're taking on when you buy a home because to be honest there's just no perfect home out there. There's always going to be items on a home inspection that a home inspector just wants to make sure you're aware of that you may have to like fix on your own or ask the seller to fix. But they're basically out there to kind of like make sure that what you're buying. And then, moving costs, are definitely a thing to kind of consider if you're not moving on your own, like the cost to pay for a mover, and then also setting up your utilities when you do get into the house.
Okay, let's talk about why working with a buyer's agent, like myself, can make a huge difference in the home buying experience. First, a lot of people are surprised to learn that we are generally of no cost to you. That being said, that can be part of the negotiation on the seller's side. But we generally are paid by the seller in the closing of the transaction, not by the buyer. So you get quite a bit of service free of cost. In most cases, we represent only your interests. There is a situation of dual agency where I may have a home listed and it may be one that you want to go for and we are working together and you have to be agreeable to allow me to represent both sides. Everything is based on a code of ethics and the legal situation of agency. So I, as your agent, am representing you fully. And that needs to be trusted in throughout the process. And and generally realtors do work to maintain that trust through to closing on your purchase. Finding a home, I'll help you filter through listings to find properties that actually fit your needs and the budget. I also have access to some off-market listings or coming soon listings. We are generally well informed with our local markets. I do encourage you to work with a local realtor. I see a lot of people working with out-of-town agents who are licensed to write the offer within the state that you are searching, but they really might not know the local market so well. Same goes if you are in Indianapolis right now and you give me a call and you want to make an offer on something in Indianapolis, I'm certainly capable of doing that, but I strongly recommend you work with a local agent who is familiar with what that local market might have in store for you. We negotiate any offer that you put forth with other realtors or with the seller. And negotiating is a skill that is not a natural skill. I think, we all know of for sale by owners, and even oftentimes we need to step in as realtors and coach on the negotiating side. It really oftentimes does not work in the layperson arena. We have to be well crafted with our offer and smart. And again, I negotiate on your terms for the best possible terms, whether that's for the pricing, the repairs, even closing costs. As Keith said, can be asked for assistance from the seller. But the negotiation process is essential to get a contract off to a good start, at a good tone, respectful tone, but at terms that can actually work for you. And navigating the inspection and closing. I would say that at inspections is generally where things can get much more tricky, because maybe the seller does not believe these problems exist that could have been found in an inspection, or they don't understand their responsibility or the goodwill in contributing toward fixing certain issues with a home. And as Keith said, no home is perfect. Inspections just, again, require a good attitude and tone for negotiating or renegotiating the original terms based on the condition of the home. But again, to have a realtor there by your side is, I suggest, a very helpful component through this process, because they are well informed, and most issues have been seen before by them. And certainly we understand if they are red flags that you need to be, concerned. We are here to talk with you. Possibly the deal falls apart, but again, we are here with you through that, and it kind of keeps things steady. And then next slide takes us into making that offer, which actually, timing wise is prior to any inspections, of course. But in this process, the reasons you'll want a realtor to work with you is that we are always trying to make sure that a seller understands that you are serious. Motivation is a word I use a lot, whether it is a seller or a buyer. We need you to be motivated to get through the entire process. When making an offer, there's always an asking price, and then sometimes there are reasons to negotiate a lower offer price, and you often need to present good evidence for the number that you are putting out there. So that is what we call the comps, comparable home prices, and we look at recent sales. Again, that's a little bit of access that you are helped to have a realtor, because a lot of people are misunderstanding with what a home ultimately sold for, because they had seen it listed at one price. It might not have settled there. But we do work with comparables all the time to hone in on a reasonable number, at least to start the negotiation process. The slide says that you may include these items, but generally these are included in every offer. There is an earnest money deposit. Like Keith said, that should be nothing that breaks the bank or takes cash from you that you will need through the process, such as home inspections and such. You'll need some of your cash. That being said, I do like to make it a 1% of the purchase price. That's a goal I have, but it is not always at that amount. Contingencies. So these are, you can think of them like check mark through the process. The goal is to drop your contingencies that you've attached within the offer. So you have a financing contingency, an appraisal contingency, and an inspection contingency, for instance. Things can fall apart if you don't meet an expectation with financing or appraisal or inspections. The flexible closing dates or concessions, these are just other factors that can be negotiated through the offer. We want to make your offer competitive, and that could mean allowing the seller additional time to hold on to the property. If you have a sense of what they're looking for in a buyer, you can kind of tailor parts of the offer to show good faith and that you are happy to work with them. Because again, writing the offer is just the beginning, and you want to maintain a respectful relationship through the process. So flexibility is good to gesture. It just has to go on paper and be held to until renegotiated, if that comes at certain times during the process. But yeah, that's making an offer on the property. The home inspection, I'll let Keith take it with the appraisal, but the home inspection, as he introduced, is in behalf of the buyer. So you pay that $400 to $600 generally in this area. It's a private inspection, and they all result in about 40 to 60 pages of a breakdown for the home's condition. And there are very common results within these. It can be a time for a buyer to frankly become panicked because it does always look like there is a lot to do on a home. And it can even be a 2-year-old home with certain suggestions from a home inspector. So we sit down and we go through them page by page and discuss what may need to be addressed immediately on the part of the seller so that this contract can move forward. But it's also an opportunity to maybe renegotiate some of the terms because the buyer and the seller both need to come to terms with how to overcome issues that need to be addressed. So a seller is often asked to fix some components, and they may say that they will not. that is a possibility. And depending on the type of loan, you may not have the opportunity to then buy it as is. And that is because of the appraisal. So I hope that made sense in the order that I stated it. But I think that it's important to know a lot of people would like a project house, or, a house where their first investment is something they can work on to make improvements and maybe not hold on to the house for many years, but be the one who can then sell it and make a profit. That can be a difficult thing for a first-time home buyer if you are using one of the loans that has a more tight appraisal process. Because unlike an inspection, which is for you as a buyer, the appraisal is for the bank. Keith, can you take that?
Yeah, so basically with an appraisal, if we're doing a government loan, which would be like FHA loans, USDA loans, and VA loans, they are going to look for health and safety issues in addition to confirming the value of the house that you're paying. So, common health and safety issues that we run into are like peeling paint, missing handrails, exposed wiring. If roof shingles are missing, which that could come up on whether it's a conventional or a government type appraisal. But whenever somebody's looking for like a fixer upper, quote unquote, typically a government loan may not be a good fit there, because if the appraiser says that anything needs to be fixed, then it's going to be on the seller to fix it, or person buying the home to fix it, which you never want to fix something that you actually don't own. So sometimes if it's minor, I will have buyers that do repairs in lieu of the seller, but definitely something that has to be taken into you got to be do it cautiously. And then with the appraised value, typically the appraisal will come in around the value or at value, but if it comes in low, then it's again a point for renegotiation, where basically the buyer would have to go back to the seller and say, well, hey, I'm paying 200,000, the house appraised for 195. We would like for you to lower the value, which nothing says that they have to do that. So sometimes it kind of goes back and forth in terms of like how to rectify that situation. But luckily we don't run into that a lot. So, something that I always tell people not to worry about until the time comes. So. And then when it comes to, final approval, which, kind of the steps in the whole loan process are, after you get pre-approved and get a contract, we basically get all of your documentation submitted to an underwriter who is going to look through the paperwork and ask like for any additional things that they need to basically make sure that the loan meets the criteria for the loan program selected. So no matter what, we're going to have to get additional documents, whether it be homeowners insurance, or we'll have to wait for like the title work to come back on the house. There's always going to be additional items that we get. So basically, once we get those items, we send it in. And then basically, if everything gets checked off on, then we get, final mortgage approval, which is, obviously a huge thing to celebrate.
Okay, closing day, and this could be for Keith to take or myself. Both of us will probably be with you on closing day, and this is the most exciting day of the process. Everything we've worked toward is closed up in this final part of the process. So first, it's the day that you'll be responsible for signing all of your legal documents to finalize the purchase. This includes your mortgage agreement, the deed, and various disclosures. Next, you'll pay your closing costs on that day, which typically include lender fees, title charges, and any remaining down payment. And finally, you get the keys. This is when the home officially becomes yours and you can start moving in and making it your own. Closing day is very exciting. It can be overwhelming. But Keith and I much enjoy this day, and we're happy to be there and explain what you're going through as the closing happens. Some tips for first-time home buyers. Always don't rush and trust the process. Buying a home can feel overwhelming, and it is a journey. Take your time and make thoughtful decisions. We're here to advise, to help, to show you more houses, to do what you need so that you're making the right decision for yourself. Um, Save more money than you think you'll need. There are always unexpected expenses, whether it's repairs, moving costs, or small things to make your new house feel like home. You need to prepare for unexpecteds. More so through the process. For instance, the home inspection, you might have $400 to $600 saved up for that. But if something in the inspection advises you to get a further inspection by a specialist of some sort, then that's another cost to you. Again, it's for your protection, but it was not a planned cost. Ask a lot of questions. I know myself, I don't always slow down and think about the fact that it's the first time for you, although I enjoy it and might take baby steps and it be too slow or gentle for you. I also am never bothered to be asked questions that might seem silly. That nothing is silly, and I'm sure you learned that in second grade. I mean, questions are essential so that you are well informed and again build confidence through the process, that you know what you are getting, um, how you are going to accomplish the ultimate goal of owning your home. Get a home warranty if it's available. I know that for first-time home buyers, that is often what we come to at the time of inspections. If it makes a buyer nervous, and this can be anybody, not only first-time home buyers, but the condition of some appliances, or that it might be toward the end of its design life. And that does not mean it needs to be replaced immediately. But you've done a lot to put money aside and save extra money. And you want to be pretty confident that if something goes wrong or out in the way of your furnace or your dishwasher, within generally the first year, you can have a second year for a home warranty. It can be a good comfort to know that that is paid for and you are protected for a period of time while you begin to have these new costs as a homeowner.
And then before we move on, I was going to add just a couple things. So, one piece of advice that I would give is to make sure to budget and kind of know what you can afford monthly on your mortgage payment. A lot of times I can approve somebody for maybe more than what they're comfortable with on their mortgage payment. So whenever somebody's getting approved, I ask them like, what do you want your mortgage payment to be? And so you want to make sure to budget and know that answer. And then don't be afraid to call me to get the process started. I think sometimes people feel like getting approved to buy a house is going to be like overwhelming, and it's not. It's very easy and simple. And you definitely don't want to wait to get approved before like you don't want to shop for homes before getting approved. And the reason for that is that sometimes, your budget does not align with the homes that you're looking at, which is obviously can be very disappointing and a big problem once you start shopping. And then the other thing is there might be things that we need to do to kind of get you ready or put you in a better position on your loan before we actually go under contract. Because sometimes we can improve your credit really easily, or maybe we need to have a little bit more time on the job. But definitely get that started before you start shopping.
Very good insert. Okay, so I think this should have said how we can help. I mean, it's definitely in tandem what Keith does and what I do. Um, Number one here of accessing the full inventory, that's for me for sure. We have access to the multiple listing service of our area. That is key to getting some background information on properties, and it's just a really great tool for us to see what the comprehensive market analysis looks like for your search. You get to see many more listings than just what's available on public websites like Zillow and Realtor.com. The neighborhood and market expertise, I had touched on that, but I do think that a realtor is able to broaden your perspective on what characteristics of neighborhoods or home types, just kind of introduce you to the broad range of what you are looking into, even if you think you want one thing, we are able to discuss that may be another consideration for either budget purposes or your lifestyle, your day-to-day routines. We might introduce you to something unexpected. The negotiations, we've talked about that, and we are here to advocate in your behalf. And to write a well-informed offer is, I think, undoubtedly better than doing it alone and simply calling it a dollar amount. There are just many more factors to go into an offer than only the cost of the property. Guidance through the process. Buying a home involves many steps. So from showings to inspections to the closing paperwork, as your agent and as your lender, we guide you through every stage and are readily available to answer your questions, because certainly as a first-time home buyer, you are not going to know exactly what is going to be next or what could arise. Sometimes complications should never be a panic. We can usually get through those, again, with a professional attitude and capabilities. Strong network of professionals that goes alongside there. But I know that in my 6 years of being a broker, I've built some strong relationships, trusting relationships with other professionals, and that helps us to work toward your goals. Save you time and stress. Looking through hundreds of listings can be overwhelming. I filter homes to match your budget and preferences, so you only see what you need to see, basically, and what fits your needs. And I schedule and coordinate showings for you, which can save you valuable time. And as I said previously, it generally costs the buyer nothing, because what we try to do is what has been done traditionally, and that is sellers paying commissions for the buyer representative. I'll let Keith.
Yeah, so I guess, when you decide it's time to, maybe try to buy a home, I would definitely schedule, a meeting. A lot of things I do are on the phone, so, I don't really need to meet face to face necessarily to get somebody pre-approved. So, just call us and let us know that you're ready, and then definitely, create a home wish list to kind of decide what you think, you want, and then we can kind of make sure that your budget and approval align with the wish list.
Once again, I'm Jessica Butler, managing broker and owner of Legacy Land Use and Realty. I'll be happy to discuss your real estate goals with you.
And I'm Keith Collins with Kentuckiana Mortgage Group. Please call if I can help.
Thank you, Jessica and Keith. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but we did have some that were submitted beforehand, so I'll just ask them and whoever wants to take it can. Would a 20% down payment get more favorable mortgage terms?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does. Kind of the advantage to putting 20% down is that you don't have to pay mortgage insurance, which, adds, additional money to your mortgage payment. You know, but not in every case does it necessarily, mean that it's going to put you into a certain program. I've got somebody right now who's putting 20% down and basically to kind of get them the best interest rate, they're actually going to choose a loan that does still have mortgage insurance. So it definitely can help, but it doesn't always guarantee which direction we end up going because you still may do a loan with mortgage insurance and see that your payment's a lot cheaper than, the other alternatives. So yeah, but it definitely is going to lower your payment a lot versus putting no money down. Absolutely.
Is there a certain time of year that is best to buy a home?
Well, spring is what everybody talks about. So I know that in February, people start talking about what is coming up in the springtime. So I think there are high expectations for spring and summer. That being said, it's year round. If you are really diligent with or if your wish list has you kind of honed in on what you're looking for already, you don't want to sleep through the fall waiting till spring because that home very well could be listed in the fall. But there is a energy in the spring and more listings, more, those are inventory, and it's good to have inventory for comps for getting into more properties. If you don't know what you're looking for, I would say spring is a good time because that might be the best time to compare. But it's year round. I would say that the hardest time is in the peak of winter because most sellers hold back from listing at that time. But there are always some to hit the market. So it's really important to not ignore what's in the market outside of springtime. But I'd be remiss if I said that spring isn't the highest energy in the market.
Another question. What is the difference between using a mortgage group as a lender versus a local bank?
So basically we are a broker, which basically means that we work with, 10, 12 different lenders. And so the advantage is that we are able to shop your loan through different companies who basically offer varying interest rates. And so typically we can get a lower rate. A lot of times our closing costs are lower as well. And we tend to have more flexibility as well in terms of like what we can, who we can get approved. I used to work at a bank and I can tell you, that none of them will go down to 500 for a credit score. So we just have a lot more options out there because we can kind of pick and choose who we work with. So, I mean, we do rehabilitation loans. We just have just so many more places that we can go to find a home for you when it comes time to buying a house.
Okay. And this may be a question more for Jessica. What would motivate a seller to contribute to closing costs?
Generally, it could be the purchase price because in simple terms, they will see that as a reduction in what they are receiving for the home. So if you're presenting an offer that is asking for up to $6,000 in closing costs and it's a $210,000 home, the seller in conversation with their advisor is going to see that as a $204,000 offer. So writing at a strong purchase price may be the single highest motivator to the seller to pay closing costs.
if someone is trying to purchase land and get a loan to build a new home, how would this process look different?
So really the biggest difference, in terms of like buying land is that your down payment requirements are higher than if you're buying something that's already there. So generally speaking, you have to put 20-25% down, to buy land. And I guess the biggest thing that's not really, I guess, covered in the question would be, the one thing I highly suggest people to do is to talk to a builder to get an idea of like how much they're going to build is going to cost. Because anymore, with how expensive materials are and labor, a lot of times it's way more expensive to build something brand new than it is to buy something that's already there. So depending on your situation, it may not be the best way to get into home ownership. It's
Okay.
expensive to build. So
Okay. Okay, I've got one more question here, unless any more come through. What are the main things I should look for during a home tour?
Ah, mm, main things during a home tour. I mean, I think from my perspective, I'm looking for red flags. I don't want you to miss what I might see as a forthcoming issue. It might just blow your mind and be the most incredible home. It might fit all your check boxes, but if I see a soggy area on a wall and I go over and I step on it and it's a soft floor, I'm going to tell you about that because it may have been easy to miss if you didn't look down or step on the floor. But I go through so many homes that I do give them probably a more critical look than the average person who might not know exactly what kind of issues are relatively common to come across. And it's never a problem to turn on faucets and, check the water pressure. These are things that come up in home inspections, but the better informed you are, the less surprising things are later. And I like to have that discussion with people earlier than later, again, to avoid any panic. And we also, when having the inspection, you don't generally get to ask for observable things. I mean, you don't get a repainted wall, for instance. If there's bubbled paint from old damage, it's expected that you've seen that. The question is whether there is current damage. So I just think that um, you can remind yourself to take a critical look. That being said, every home has issues, and the more you look at, the more you understand that you can also fix any issue with a home. There are remedies. Now, you might not want to get into that extent of work, but what you should look for, it kind of is anything that you can find. You want to be as familiar as possible with the property, and you become more familiar at the time of inspections. But um, yeah, uh, red flags can be any anywhere within a home. So you want to look at the outbuildings. You want to look around the perimeter of the home. Moisture is always not a red flag. I should not call it a red flag because, again, you can overcome some of these issues. Even if, I'm able to negotiate with the seller or the seller agent, can you go ahead and put a dehumidifier in there because it's moist and we witness that and we want to not put off for 30 to 40 days overcoming this issue. So, yeah, I mean, anything and everything should be kind of what you're to look for. And we're here to help because you might not know, what you're observing.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have. for Jessica and Keith. So we will go ahead and move on to Shelby Wilson, and she is going to speak about the Habitat for Humanity home buying process.
Hello, I'm Shelby with Habitat Southeast Indiana. I've been in my position for about 3 years, but I started at Habitat about 4 years ago. I loved everything that Jessica and Keith had to say. That's very important, but buying a home traditionally is not for everyone, and that's kind of where Habitat comes in. So Habitat is not a hand or is a hand up, not a handout. There is some misconception that we give our houses away at no cost, but we do not do that. We provide decent, affordable housing for low-income families. It's decent, as in it is the perfect size for your family. You'll have everything you need, but it's not going to be world-class fixtures. And then our families pay back a 0 interest mortgage. That is the biggest difference between Habitat and buying a home traditionally. There are a lot of low interest mortgages, but Habitat is 0 interest, and your monthly payments are going to be based on your income. So what does it take to be Habitat partner family? We have 3 main selection criteria: need, ability to pay, and willingness to partner. Need can be anything from the current place you're living in. Maybe the landlord isn't keeping up with it the way that they should, or the house that you're currently living in is too small or not affordable for your family. Ability to pay means that homeowners must be able to pay the 0 interest mortgage. We do have some income qualifications that we'll talk about later, but that is important. And then willingness to partner. So we have something at Habitat called sweat equity, and that is when our families, our partner families, they volunteer to build their house with us. So you get to know your house that way. And you get to know the people that are helping build your house too, getting to know the volunteers, and then you're also volunteering in the restore and in the community some as well. I pretty much went over sweat equity a little bit, but I will say that there are some adjustments we can make to sweat equity if you don't have the physical ability to work on your house. There are ways we can work around that because some of the working on the house is hard work, but that's really important when it comes to, oh no, I need to repair my water heater. Well, you helped put it in, so now you know how to make those repairs. Finances. So just like buying a house traditionally, there are some financial considerations for Habitat. We do have a down payment. There are income caps, and we have closing costs and mortgage payment terms. And these are all just so we make sure that you will be able to pay your monthly mortgage payments. So to get more into that, housing costs I mentioned earlier is based on income. That is per HUD standards. So you wouldn't be spending more than 30% of your family's monthly income on housing costs. That includes your taxes and insurance. And then the debt to income ratio is important as well. We never want to put a family in the position where their debt becomes overwhelming. So your current monthly expenses should not exceed over 43% of the family's monthly income. And then income requirements. This is probably one of the biggest things we look at when we're accepting applications. because we want to make sure that you can afford to purchase a Habitat house and that you are able to stay in there long term. The house that we're going to be building next is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so we could have potentially up to 4 people in that home. And the amount of people in the home changes the income requirements a little bit. So if it was one person applying for the house, the minimum income is $30,000 a year, and the maximum is $550,000 a year. But as you can see, it goes up the more people that are in the home. And then what to expect as far as down payments and insurance and closing costs. Our down payments are a lot more affordable than majority of down payments. It's just $750. And that will also go towards your closing costs. Our down payment is more of you expressing interest into our program. And then insurances and closing costs. At closing, I'd prepare for up to $4,000. The insurance and closing costs is something that is going up on a yearly basis. So we want to make sure that you're prepared to pay everything. And then construction. So I mentioned earlier that Habitat houses are what you need, maybe not everything that you want. So our houses are moderately sized. The largest house we've built so far is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. We could build up to 4-bedroom, but if you apply for a Habitat house, we're not going to build you an extra guest room just because you want one. We will build what you need. We use quality construction materials, a lot of donated materials, and it's also built using volunteer labor. And that is pretty much it. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shelby. Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Jessica. We really appreciate all the good information you gave us. As an aspiring homeowner myself, I know I took away a lot of great things today. This session was recorded and it will be available on Habitat Southeast's website sometime next week. And if anyone has any further questions in the future, please feel free to reach out to Jessica and Keith and Shelby. They would be more than happy to assist you. Thank you again for joining.